I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com and make sure to follow us on social media at filmmaker_u on Twitter, and make sure to check off the subscribe and notification bell on YouTube. Every week, we interview film professionals to discuss their work, and this is made possible by our sponsors, OWC. Uh, for more information on this, you can go to owcdigital.com. And this week, I'm joined by John Ramsay, who's longtime collaborator with Dave Grohl, and has created the films What Drives Us, Sound City, Sonic Highways, the show, and an exciting new documentary From Cradle to Stage. Welcome to the show, John.
Hello, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and I do want to say you have done stuff without Dave Grohl. You do have a
Yes.
VFX company. You do have, you did No One Saw a Thing, which was fantastic, and kind of like just a crazy story. Uh, so,
Yeah.
so like when you're looking as a producer for docs, what do you look for? What is it that attracts you to a story?
The thing I love so much about documentary filmmaking is, it's a good mixture of art and journalism. So I'm just looking for any sorts of stories that are, exciting and grab my interest. And along the way, you try to tell it in the most creative way that you can.
So how did your relationship with Dave Grohl uh, become a thing?
Yeah, so I produce all of those projects with my producing partner, Jim Rhoda. Jim and I have known each other since high school, and Jim also has a band, and guy who produced one of his records also produced some Foo Fighters records. So he introduced Jim and Dave, 20 years ago. So when Dave started on this idea for the Sound City movie and purchasing that Neve console and moving it into
Mm-hmm.
his studio, he reached out to Jim and he said, "Hey, you work in the film business. I want to make a movie. You hear about this?" So Jim was like, "Well, it's a pretty big project. Let me bring in my friend John, who has a production and a post-production company. It's a bit more plug and play for this sort of thing." And so I started working on that project, before I'd even met Dave.
Mm-hmm.
I met him on set for our first interview, and it's been a great relationship. He's such a great person to collaborate with. He
Well, yeah,
does
yeah.
these projects just because he loves them and he loves the idea. I mean, he doesn't need the hassle. I mean, we all know how much of a pain in the butt making anything in this business is. He doesn't need the headaches. He's got nothing to prove. He
Mm-hmm.
just really does it because he's passionate about it, and it's just great to work with people like that because you're doing it for all the right reasons.
Well, and I think about like what drives us. Like as soon as I saw the trailer, I was like, I was in a band in a van driving around in like the dead of winter in Canada. So were you in a band before that, or is it you?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. Like, I've never been in a band. I mean, obviously, I'm a huge music lover. I mean, like,
Mhm.
music is in my life all the time, but I'm generally very uncomfortable with, performing and being in front of cameras and that sort of thing. So, um, yeah, it was interesting that a subject that, I mean, I know a little bit about it because I'm friends with
Mhm.
people who are in bands, but I've heard on tour. So to to be able to tell that story in a way that's interesting and educational for people who've never done it or don't know anything about it,
Mhm.
that was a big part of the project as well.
Well, and I think about the thing that captured really well is the amount of hours in between. It's like, okay, we're gonna go on an 18-hour drive now.
I know, it's such, you really have to, you know want it it has to be like you can't do anything else in your life. Like this is the only option for you, because yeah, just setting off on the road with, a basic plan, but not really knowing what you're going to do from day to day. And then lugging all that gear into a club, setting up, playing your heart out, taking it apart, jumping back in the van and driving on to the next town.
Yeah. Now, like when you
It's
were
a special breed.
Yeah, oh yeah. Like I think after the first tour, I was like, I'm good.
Yeah, exactly.
You did a project for Quibi, and I want to know what it was like producing, because it was such a new concept, and it didn't make it, but it was such a unique concept, and I'm wondering what it was like to try and produce for this young company.
Yeah, that was an interesting one because aside from the producing work that I do, I also am a partner in a post-production company. I mean, Therapy Studios is mostly a post-production company.
Mm-hmm.
So the Quibi project came to us through the production company. I believe it was OBB Productions.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to remember. We do a lot of projects, so it's hard to always keep the details straight. But so that, I believe, was produced with a company, production company, Pretty Bird, out here in LA. And that it started in-house there with one of their editors. And then, as documentary projects tend to go, they tend to go long, and you start to, not, difficulties is too strong of a word, but, there's just challenges along the way. So there were rough cuts of all of those episodes for that series and music when it came to us. It's like, okay, well, we really need to get this thing into shape and get it done. So then our editing team took all those over and kind of cleaned everything up. And being used to doing a lot of these music-based doc series, we were, have a lot of systems set up. So my post supervisors and post producers were able to, get everything organized and whipped into shape pretty quickly. But yeah, I mean, producing for Quibi was strange because, yeah, they were trying to make these bite-sized pieces of content strictly for your mobile phone, which made sense to me on paper. Like, yeah, you want to meet your audience where they are. Like anybody under the age of 30, their face is shoved into their phone all day long. Like, yeah, okay, great. But they were, trying to accommodate an audience that looked at their phone like in a vertical manner, and working on this technology, when you flip the phone sideways, then it would go to a landscape mode. And it just felt like they were trying to jump through too many hoops there. I don't think it's too hard to ask the audience to turn their phone sideways. But yeah, it was a pretty spectacular failure on Quibi's part. But the series we did for them was great.
Well, yeah, that's why I'm wondering, like, because there was a bunch of series in there that had a lot of potential and were entertaining. It just didn't survive in time.
Yeah, and they kicked around ideas about like, oh, you have your bite-sized pieces, and then maybe also cut them together as a longer form piece. There were all sorts of different ideas. I don't think they ever really figured it out.
What happened? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, what happened to the ownership of it? Because I remember when Ciso went under, the contracts they had with their creators was that the creators got the content back. Was it like the comedians who created the shows?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
So
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what happened with that. I would assume since Quibi is no more, that everything kind of went back to whoever produced it. But
yeah, well, we had talked about there's so many streaming platforms now. How do you get grab people's attention for your shows when
You
there's so
know,
much?
the process of like trying to get something sold is still the same. You know, you've
Hmm.
got to work with agents and whatnot and try to get meetings at these streamers and networks and come in and, you know, show them your teaser, show them your pitch material, do the tap dance, sell them on what you're doing. I mean, so that actually hasn't changed.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know what makes the marketing and the promotions departments tick inside these big companies
Hmm.
now. It's like, you know, I have some friends who work, you know, some friends who still work at HBO from when we did the Sonic Highways
Hmm.
series. And, you know, HBO is a vastly different company than what it was, you know, even a few years ago. I mean, I don't even know who owns them anymore. It's like
Yeah.
changed hands so many times, and now they're like wrapped up with AT&T and who knows what. And so I think there's a lot of just change internally at these companies, culturally, just like logistically. It's like, yeah, it's hard to figure out. There's so many things move, so many moving parts.
I'd love to ask you about your VFX work, because like you said, you're one of the owners of
Sure.
this company that's been doing VFX for quite a while, and you've worked on Crank High Voltage, which
Yeah.
is a classic. And so, what are some of the challenges you find in the VFX industry that young people getting into the industry might not be aware of?
Um, well, VFX is not, there's no VFX union to speak of. So that's good and bad in the feature film world, because um, you're you're able to kind of work more flexibly,
Mhm.
but there is also, for like a young VFX artist trying to get into the game, there's just a lot of pressure to do extra work, basically, you know, just putting in the hours for free. And you know, there's this mentality in our business that you got to bleed for it to prove to people that you want it badly enough. So it's difficult to kind of walk that line of like communicating the value of your service while at the same time, you know, being a good partner and,
Mhm.
you know, being perceived as a team player. Like you're always weighing the decision in front of you. Like, all right, am I going to give up my Saturday, my Sunday, and work on this, even though nobody's specifically asking for it? But we all know what the expectations are. It's kind of like
Mhm.
this unwritten code in the production world that, you know, you do it at, you know, whatever the cost, because
Mhm.
this is like, you know, I'm going to show everybody how hard I work and I've earned my stripes and I'm the biggest badass ever. But so, yeah, starting out in the VFX game, it's like, you know, you have to navigate those waters. It's pretty tricky.
Wow. And now, when the pandemic hit, how did you guys pivot so that you could still, maintain the work and, work from home?
Yeah, it was a wild month of trying to figure that out. But I think, you know, the post-production work we do, we're pretty uniquely positioned to transition into remote work, because a lot of times we're sitting in rooms alone for 16 hours at a clip anyway. And, you know, I think a lot of businesses over the last 5 years, pre-pandemic, were figuring out like how to do more with less resources.
Mhm.
So, you know, 10 years ago, when clients would come and they'd spend weeks and weeks with us sitting in a bay working on a project, and that was the one and only thing they had to do. Now they're working on 3 or 4 projects at the same time, so they don't have as much time to come and sit with us in our studio and watch paint dry. So we were used to doing work, posting things for people to see remotely, getting notes, doing changes, posting, sending it back. So it was really just a matter of getting all the gear into people's personal homes. They didn't have to come into the studio, but it was, it was a smoother transition than I thought it would be.
Now, is there, in your VFX career, is there a scene or an effect that was really hard, but you're super proud of, and you want to sort of hold up as an example of your work?
Well, one of my partners, Doobie White, he's an editor, and so all of these studio films that we've done visual effects work on have all come out of his work as an editor. And he's really just an incredibly talented mad scientist. Like, he's working in Avid and he's cutting his own temp VFX as he goes.
Oh, wow.
Like, he's cooking up all these crazy ideas, and then when things start to get a little bit heavier than he can do with just simple 2D compositing in Avid, he'll work with some After Effects artists or some flame artists, and they'll create some elements for him, or he'll give them some pieces and direct them to plus things up a little bit. So I would say probably Ghost Rider, the Ghost Rider 2, what was it? Spirit of Vengeance or something like that. I can't remember the exact title, but there are these scenes where Nick Cage is turning into the Ghost Rider. And it's sort of like his face half transitions into the skull, but you can still see his eyes and a lot of his skin. Those were particularly good. And
well,
that was really fun.
Yeah, they stand up, that's for sure.
Yeah, and that was really fun to work on. I mean, say what you will about the movie and the story. Working with all those smoke and fire and particle simulations, and that was the first time that I saw these CG fire and smoke effects, and I was like, all right, yeah, this looks legit.
Now, I have one last question that I ask everyone I interview. We've been stuck in this pandemic for over a year, and because of that, many people sort of adopted new streaming services or started watching things on streaming services. Is there a show or movie that you've discovered over the pandemic that you think people should check out?
This is kind of embarrassing, but I think I was the only person on planet Earth who hadn't watched any Game of Thrones prior to the pandemic. So when I was locked down early pandemic, I was like, all right, I have to watch this. Like, this is ridiculous that I haven't seen any of it.
Yeah.
So I just barreled through the whole series.
The whole thing, even the last season, because people were upset about the last season.
Yeah, I started with episode 1 and I just hammered through, 2 or 3 episodes a day. Like, once I have a whole separate life, once my family falls asleep at 8, 9 o'clock, and I'm up until 1, 2 in the morning by myself doing, just catching up on things, watching shows. So yeah, I binge watched the whole series.
Wow. Well,
I can now finally talk about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Years late to the party, but I figured it out.
It's okay. I've only seen the first season, so I'll have to catch up.
Well, you're the other guy on Planet.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
And that's it for this week, guys. Make sure to check out filmmakeru.com for our latest courses, and follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u, and on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to check out our weekly videos. I want to thank I want to thank John for joining us.
Thank
And
you.
of course, you can check out our sponsors, OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking needs. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching.